Bartholomew Town, bringing Rhode Islanders closer to their world since 2018. Brought to you in part by the University of Rhode Island Online, Newport Film, Half Street Group, Navigant Credit Union, and the Audubon Society of Rhode Island.
Bartholomew Town.
Welcome into Bartholomew Town. I'm Bill Bartholomew. This morning, Governor Dan McKee held a roundtable discussion for select reporters about his decision, which he announced during this roundtable, to not sign the budget that was just passed by the General Assembly. I was in the room asking questions along with several other reporters, and I've decided to go ahead and publish the entirety of this roundtable. So if you're interested, you can get a sense of the governor's thinking and kind of go inside a little bit deeper than any just sort of broad-based analysis would provide. But in sum, a couple of things to note. This is not a veto. By law, by not signing the budget will go into effect. It'll be implemented this Friday. So that's one thing. The governor, over and over again, making the argument in this roundtable that this budget that was passed by the General Assembly adds fees and taxes which he deems unnecessary. And you'll hear his thinking fleshed out along with Brian Daniels from the Department of Administration on exactly why they made this decision. So here it is. It's a long set of audio. But for those of you that are interested, I thought, I'm there. Let me take the audio. Let me publish it. And just rather than offer that sort of executive summary, go inside the room and get a sense of the energy, get a sense of the feelings behind this, which Governor McKee makes pretty clear.
Well, thanks everybody for being here, and I think that top of mind is the budget, this year's budget, and that's what we're here to talk about today. Just as a kind of a little reminder of how this works, we present a budget in January, and we work on it from August through that time frame, so it's a long process, and that's one of the reasons I have Brian Daniels here today. Brian is certainly heading up that effort to really put together a good budget, and we pride ourselves on presenting a good, solid, balanced budget each and every year, and we did that again this year. Then the House looks at this for a short period of time, and then they roll out a budget where we're involved in it, but yet not privy to a lot of the things that are in the budget. And so it takes a little while for us to digest that over the last week, and we're here today to talk about the package that we put together and where it differs and where we have concerns on the current budget. But first, there's many good things in the budget that we put in that have to do with the focus is on our Rhode Island 2030 plan, which is education, raising academic outcomes. It has to do with making sure that we're putting people to work at good paying jobs and raising incomes, as well as health issues, making sure we're healthy, and then building things. And we're doing that. And so budgets are really important. They speak to our priorities, and our priorities are in the Rhode Island 2030 plan. But what this budget does, though, it taxes people and raises fees unnecessarily. And I want to talk specifically about those fees, and then we'll do a handoff to Brian to kind of lay out some of the things that I believe why it was unnecessary to raise fees on families, people who live in the state of Rhode Island in a time frame where there's a lot of uncertainty and there's a great deal of challenges that are going on. So our broad base, our idea in our budgets is not to be raising taxes, be competitive with our bordering states in particular, so that we keep the economy going in a direction that is being recognized by ranking services all around the country. Right? We've moved up 12 spots on the state economy in the last rankings, and one of the national rankings. We've moved up 12 spots on infrastructure rankings since I've been governor. We've moved up over 13 spots on states that are most livable in the country, and that's a reflection of the budgets. So when we tax people unnecessarily and raise the cost of driving a car, or we raise the cost of owning a home, which is part of the 2030 plan, is to make sure that we're providing opportunities for home ownership. And yet, this budget puts conveyance taxes in that is going to create transactions that are going to be more costly, and it's going to be money out of the hard-working people in the state of Rhode Island's pockets. Or when we do a broad-based increase on health insurance, where it could impact families of 4 as much as $200 a year, and yet we're facing estimates in the HMOs that could considerably increase the cost of health care, and that's yet to be determined by our OHIC office. So, saying those things, this is a budget that I'm not going to sign. And we've notified both the Secretary of State's office before this press conference, as well as the House and Senate office, for the reasons why, and we'll supply that letter, which is a public letter. But in essence, it's what I just outlined.
You'll veto
This
it, or you just
this is
want-
not. This is. I'll hand it to Brian, but and certainly answer all the questions after Brian gets into a couple of the details on the overview that I've given. But this is not the time to raise fees and taxes that could have been avoided. And that's the reason that I will not be signing this budget.
And you're going to be vetoing it, Governor, or letting it become law without your signature?
I'm not going to sign it. It will go into law. But I'm here today to tell you why I'm not signing it, and the precedent, or that is setting in a very difficult time. And I want to ask Brian to kind of go through some of the details, and then we'd love to open it up to
If
any
you feel
questions.
that strongly, why don't you veto it?
Yeah, so we've been letting the General Assembly know exactly how I feel on all these issues. Right from the point in time when I had my State of the State address and talked about the fact that we don't want to be raising taxes in a time frame that is difficult on people and uncertain. So
why not veto it? Same question.
yeah, so the question is a good question. I don't have line item veto. If I did have a line item veto, there wouldn't have been a gas tax increase. So you don't have a line item veto. So I deal in the world that is the reality. I believe that the best message that I can send right now is what I'm doing today, which is letting people know that they're being taxed unnecessarily, and we'll let the general public determine whether or not they feel as I do. Brian.
All right, so we're going to give you this letter. Give you a second to look at it. And I do ask that you wait for Brian to finish his thing before we open it up to questions.
Can you not script everything? Just let it go. Governor, do you like this?
Well, I want
scripting everything?
No, what I want you to. We're certainly not scripting this, and that's why we're meeting the way we're meeting today. I want Brian to lay out some of the things that I believe are important relative to the things I've just said, and then open territory. Open territory. Let's just let Brian kind of outline the fact that the numbers that I talked about, I think he needs to be a little bit more specific. He's not going to go in big detail, and then we certainly open it up to any questions you have. Right now, I'm happy to be here as long as you want me to be here, Jim.
Thank you, Governor. So I'll start with a talking point that I'm sure many of you have heard me speak about before. One of the long-term strategies of the governor and this administration when it comes to coming up with budgets is reducing our structural deficit, and that means making sure that our revenue growth is in line with our expenditure growth. Right now, at our last time we looked at the 5-year forecast, our revenues were growing at 2.8%. That is steady, that is respectable, but our expenditures are growing at 3.5%. That's largely driven by grants and benefits. So when we put the budget together, we tried to make sure we were constraining spending and new initiatives. This budget adds another $65 million to the budget that we submitted, and the overall cost growth of the budget, of the general revenue budget, is 3.8% this year. Some of the new fees that the governor mentioned include an increase in the real estate conveyance tax on properties below $800,000. We had proposed an increase in the real estate conveyance tax above $800,000, and that was specifically to support homelessness and housing affordability initiatives. There's a sales tax on parking. There's a $10 increase in surcharges to DMV fees, and gas taxes going up 2 cents per gallon. That moves us out of line with our neighboring states. So Massachusetts is about 27 cents per gallon. Connecticut is about 41 cents per gallon. So we're moving out of line with that. 41 cents in Connecticut is including some other fees that they have. Their base tax is 25 cents, but they also have some other fees. And the other major expenditure increase that the governor mentioned was the $30 million that health insurers are going to have to pay to support some of the primary care and other health care initiatives in here. And that is going to translate to about $4 per member per month on every person who has health insurance in the state. So, as the governor mentioned, that's, for an individual, that's $48 per person. A family of 4, that's $200. That is a concern for a number of reasons. One, you may have seen that the Office of the Health Insurance Commissioner has received requests from the commercial health insurers about what rate increases they're looking for. They range between 21% and almost 29% in the coming year. That's attributable to a number of factors. One of them is the expiration of the enhanced premium tax credits that have made healthcare more affordable since about the time of COVID. So Congress had passed around COVID an affordability tax credit to make it easier for families to afford health care. That is expiring at the end of this year, and Kaiser Family Foundation expects that that's going to cost about $700 more in premium. So this is another $48 on top of an expiring tax credit. That is going to hit pretty much everyone, including people insured in HealthSource Rhode Island. The other reason we're concerned about raising revenues at this time is we don't have a lot of certainty about what's happening in Washington, D.C. So we are very carefully watching what's happening with the reconciliation process with the House and the Senate. But for example, there are discussions about increasing the state's contribution to the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, the SNAP program, the Food Assistance Program for families. One of the proposals that's being circulated could cost the state of Rhode Island about $100 million. They're looking at provider taxes and changing the way that hospitals and nursing homes and others, the rates that they pay. That may have an effect on some of our revenues, as well as the state directed payments program. So that is an initiative that we worked on with the hospitals in fiscal year 2024. That added $110 million net new to hospitals. That is also being scrutinized. So there are a number of areas of uncertainty in the federal government, and we may need to decide we need revenue sources to support some of these. We'll try to see what we can manage internally, but we may need revenue sources. So one of the concerns is adding new revenue sources when the situation in DC is so uncertain. So we believe that we could have closed the deficit, we could have closed this budget without some of the substantial increases in the fees. After the revenue estimating conference, we had about $67 million in available revenues that the General Assembly could have used to close this budget. So we did have some changes in our budget from when we submitted in January. We always have some swings in the budget from what we proposed in January to when the budget is closed in June. We believe we could have accommodated all of those and still had enough money for the primary care rate increase that is recommended in the budget, and about $15 million left over for other healthcare and education initiatives. The governor said in his transmittal letter that if there was additional funding, he would want it to support primary care and education initiatives. We think that we could have accommodated that without any new taxes and fees. We also think we could have supported RIPTA throughout without increasing the gas tax by 2 cents. We do have an existing motor fuel bond that is getting paid off. That 2 cents of the existing gas tax is dedicated to that. So that will be freeing up 2 cents of the existing gas tax. That's about $8.5–9 million that would have been available to RIPTA. And we also have substantial carry forward from other DOT projects. Between fiscal year 24 and 25, we had about $270 million of state funding through the capital budget, the highway maintenance account, and general obligation bonds. We think there's enough money that we could have come up with a short-term solution for RIPTA while provide $15 million as the General Assembly did, while they complete their efficiency study, and we are able to develop a long-term plan.
Well, why didn't you include that in the budget proposal from the governor?
We were waiting for the results of the efficiency study, and I think we were very frustrated that the study was supposed to be done in the spring. Originally, it was supposed to be done much earlier. We wanted it to be done to inform our decisions, and I think the findings of the study are still coming out, and they need to do some additional research. So we don't know the scope of the problem. We think $15 million is a reasonable amount that we can accommodate, but we do need to understand what the long-term need is.
Guys,
So
just
what
real,
was your- so
hold
what-
on, just a second, Patrick. The people who are live streaming can't hear your question, so if you just let folks know, you can ask your question, but please do it into the mic, okay?
So what do you want to cut from the General Assembly's budget spending?
So, Governor, the budgets are about choices, and we can go line by line, or we could just say that we have $15 million, and if we made a commitment not to increase taxes and fees, we would have had to accommodate the choices with that $15 million on top of the primary care. It's worth asking, as you see some of the investments in the budget, is it worth increasing tax on parking? Is it worth doing some of these other increases to the real estate conveyance tax to pay for these? Again, budgets are about choices. We're not going to go line by line and say what would be in and what would be out.
Why not? If it's about choices, that's what
Because
you
the
have
ship
to
has
do.
sailed. I mean, we thought they could
You
have done
also
it.
didn't comment when, by the time, after the budget was released by the House Finance Committee, and when it was actually passed, when there could have been changes made, you made no comment at all and waited till after the General Assembly passed it. Isn't it, if you're going to criticize it, isn't it your job to provide solutions and alternatives before it's passed?
So we did. I mean, on the RIPTA, certainly, we have ongoing meetings with both the Speaker and the Senate President. I think that's unprecedented that we've been having those meetings that long. And we talked about a RIPTA solution that, as Brian described. The General Assembly decided not to go that route. So the things that we put on the table during the discussions in a short time frame, by the way, right? I mean, you've got a couple of days to absorb a budget which had significant changes in it. But I was I think when I'm talking about it, I've said every time I've been interviewed that I had concerns about raising taxes on people, working people unnecessarily on their cars, on the health insurance, as well as their real estate. So I haven't been quiet about that.
Terrific. What's next? Then Ed.
Governor, why not? Is this on?
It's on, yeah.
Governor, why not go with these concerns? Why not go all in, veto, and have a showdown with the General Assembly if these are reflections of your priorities and the budget? In here, you have a line developing a more responsible path next year. Does that mean that this year's budget is irresponsible and going to hurt Rhode Islanders? Why not go all the way and veto it and revise the entire, basically have a de facto line item veto behind the scenes?
Yeah, so it doesn't work that way, Bill. So, but I can tell you that today's meeting makes it very clear where I stand as governor, that this is not the time to be putting fees and additional taxes on the working families in the state of Rhode Island. And that's why I wanted Brian to lay out the fact that the letter that I sent was specific. If there was additional funds, that we would do it towards education and primary care, which they did do that. They do, I think that they shared that in my conversations with them. So we're making it very, very clear today that I'm not signing a budget where normally governors sign budgets, that I'm drawing a line that we need to be a great deal more fiscal responsibility on behalf of the taxpayers in the state of Rhode Island.
Okay, so with Ed.
Governor, you're criticizing the House budget. The House Speaker, you said you gave him a budget with big holes in it. You said you had proposed closing the minimum security prison, backed off of that. You said you proposed a digital ad tax that he considered too speculative. Your response?
So my response is that we gave him a good budget based on the information that we had, knowing that there would be additional resources that would come in May. It historically happens that way. And I believe that we gave them a good budget that was manageable, that we could hit all the things that we need to hit on behalf of the taxpayers and that we came in with an additional $67 million. And so the gaps that are being described, that you just described, would be easily covered by that additional revenue of $67 million. So I would say, look, we gave them a good budget, as we have every year, and they gave us a bad budget. And so that's why I'm here today to say that we could have done things that would have been better for the taxpayers and the people who live in the state of Rhode Island without raising their costs, again, on the housing transactions, on the vehicles, cost of a vehicle, and certainly cost of health insurance.
So Nancy was up next, then Jim.
Two questions. First, have you notified the Speaker and the Senate President that you do not intend to sign this, and if so, when?
So we notified both, I mentioned in my comments, both the Secretary of State, which is the process that a letter goes to, a transmittal letter, as well as the House and Senate has received this before this meeting.
And secondly, you talk about sort of uncertainty in Washington and the need to have fiscal responsibility now more than ever amid slower spending growth, but at the same time you say that all of these taxes and fees, which would raise our revenue and maybe mitigate for some of the changes in Washington, are unnecessary. Can you explain how this is not a contradictory message?
Well, it's unnecessary because we had $67 million to fill the holes that were what I felt is the most important, and they have been filled. The uncertainty is yet to be seen. But this is not the time. You've got inflation issues that families are worried about. You've got cost of living issues. This only adds to the cost of living for a family in the state of Rhode Island, which I don't believe was necessary.
Governor, getting back to the veto question, it seems like you're trying to thread the needle here. I want to send a strong message, but I'm not going to go as far as the veto. The strong message would be bringing every legislator back on a hot day in July to have to get on the record in a building that they don't want to be in. They made vacations to upset the apple cart. Sitting here talking to us, so the message goes out. Not all those legislators are going to read this. Having to come back to vote to override a veto would do it. Why don't you feel that strongly?
Yeah, we balanced a lot of the things in terms of the judgment here. I think that we're in the right spot, Jim. But I mean, it's a good point to make.
Gabrielle.
Governor, did you make it clear in advance of the budget passing that you wouldn't sign a budget with these taxes and fee increases? And if so, do you think the General Assembly just didn't care what you told them?
We made it very clear on multiple things that this was something that I didn't agree with, including the way that the RIPTA was financed through a 2-cent gas tax. Remember, when you got the information about these issues for the first time, I got it for the first time. So there's not a long time frame to be. First of all, we couldn't have, before the budget was passed, we couldn't have been talking about a 2-cent gas tax when we didn't know it was coming, right? Just like you didn't know it was coming. So we're responding in real time, and that's what we're doing today.
Do you think you should have a line item veto?
I've said publicly for quite some time that I think 40 some odd states have a line item veto. I think it makes sense to have a line item veto, but I don't see that coming anytime soon.
Great. All right, Steve.
Governor, we're worried about the impact on working families, and we want to be in line with other states. Why not support a millionaire's tax, which would have covered all this stuff and more, and brought us in line with Massachusetts and prevented the impact on working families?
Well, I think it's an appropriate question if you need the funds to. I don't want to tax people unless I know why I'm taxing them. And our argument here is that the $67 million that we had would have handled the education issues, that would have handled the issues in terms of primary care without raising it. There may come a time when there's a reason to support tax increases, but this is not the time. You don't just raise taxes for the sake of raising taxes because you have a sense that that's the appropriate thing to do. We raise taxes because there's reasons for that, and right now you didn't have a reason for it. The $67 million plus was going to cover all the issues that needed to be covered, in my opinion. And there wasn't a reason to do it. It may come, and I've said this publicly. Let's see what happens in Washington. Let's see what comes our way. And there may be a time that you need to discuss that. But I also have, as a governor and as a running many budgets, this is not the first budget cycles I've been in. I ran many budgets, smaller, in Cumberland, but 12 budgets I ran, and we never raised taxes unless I could tell the taxpayers why I would support a tax increase. And I'm here to tell you today, there wasn't a reason to raise expenses on cars. There wasn't a reason to raise taxes on home ownership, which I think is an integral part about our effort on our 2030 plan. And there wasn't a reason to raise cost on health care for families.
Governor, you, most of the time you've been governor, you've had a pretty good, seemingly, relationship with Speaker Shekarchi. Obviously, this is a notable morning that you're coming in to say you just said, quote, a bad budget. We all know there's the political speculation around the two of you as well. Should we view this as a shift in your level of trust in Speaker Shekarchi and kind of your ability to work together in the way that you think is appropriate?
No, I think that we've, as I said before, managing with the General Assembly has been something that has been a high priority with me, and it's been with the leadership both in the House and the Senate, and that's going to continue.
Governor, can you name any spending in the budget that has passed that you would cut or trim?
Well, I would have handled the RIPTA different. I certainly wouldn't have put a 2-cent gas tax in, as Brian explained how we could have handled that issue.
And
Bartholomew Town.
Half Street Group brings a new generation's perspective to leadership communications, strategic public relations, and digital marketing. Half Street helps organizations and leaders take control of their own stories and manage their reputations. They get results for their clients by focusing on audience, message, and culture, and by leveraging their decade-long relationship with media and opinion leaders in the Ocean State and throughout New England. Join me and Half Street Group founder and president Mike Rea for a conversation every month about news of the day, the hottest media analysis, and a look behind the scenes at how impactful leaders drive conversations. Learn more at halfstreetgroup.com. As Rhode Island's first ever member-owned credit union, Navigant Credit Union has been a staple in the local business community for more than 108 years. Yeah. Today, Navigant is a $3.4 billion institution serving more than 136,000 members across 25 physical branch locations. But since its founding in 1915, the mission has never changed. Navigant Credit Union's team of financial professionals have remained committed to improving the financial well-being of the families, businesses, and communities they serve across Rhode Island. Learn more at navigantcu.org.
Typically, we see the budget agreed upon between the governor and the Senate president and the speaker before it comes out in its amended version. So do you feel like they cut you out of the negotiations at a certain point?
Well, I'll let Brian answer that question to a little degree, because I mean, staff to staff, Brian can speak to that. But I have said that there's, the issues that I'm talking about today were not privy to me until it was privy to you, right? In terms of the meeting when it was posted. Brian.
So the State Budget Office and I are in constant contact with the House and Senate fiscal advisors. Those are largely technical questions about understanding some of the governor's initiatives. They may ask questions about proposals that we put forward, alternatives, but nothing to the extent that we talked about some of the new revenue sources.
Governor, getting back to the question of taxing the rich, where do you stand on what's being called the Taylor Swift tax?
Well, I stand with the fact that we didn't have to raise taxes on anyone in this budget. We could have balanced the budget and met the most important issues that were still on the table, with closing some of the gaps that happened after the fact. We don't have a crystal ball in November on everything as we put together. So I still stand in a position that says, let's tax people when we need to, but when we don't need to, hold off until we need to. So we're in a position where we may need to do it because we don't know what's coming our way from Washington. So when you tax people when you don't need to do it, that leaves you less resources to tax, to implement taxes when you actually need it.
I mean, if you determine in the future that you do need it, are you for it or against it?
We'll take that as it comes, but I have not. I believe that budgets are really important, and how you balance budgets are very important. And if we need to increase taxes on anyone. I got to be in a position to say this is the reason I'm doing it. I also think that increasing taxes could also provide tax relief, right? There's a certain way that you can manage that as well. So when you bring additional revenue in, you got to have a reason to do it. And my reasoning is, when I was a mayor of the town of Cumberland, I had eight upgrades on my bond rating. Today, and I you guys can check it, but we've had 2 bond upgrades because of, and I want Brian to speak to that in terms of fiscal management, which is important in terms of positioning the state of Rhode Island for a stronger economy. We have more people working today than ever in the history of the state of Rhode Island. We're building more than billions of dollars of work is doing right now, and we can control that. And our budgets cover those expenses, both public and private. So, to answer your question, when the time comes and I'm governor, and we need to raise taxes, I'm going to tell people why we need to raise taxes. What I'm here to tell you today is that you didn't need to raise taxes to balance the budget on the critical issues that we're talking about in the state in this budget.
So you're against the Taylor Swift tax?
I didn't say that. I said when it comes time, if we need to raise taxes, I'm going to explain why. And right now, what I'm telling you, at this moment in time, there wasn't a need to raise taxes on anybody in the state of Rhode Island, and you could have balanced the budget. On the revenue, I see Tom Verdi walked in and out of here. Look, we're working every day to bring the revenue in that the state needs. When it was estimated in November, it was $67 to $80 million less than what we actually had available. So our budget reflected that at that point in time. Well, when that was identified, that those dollars have come in, that's why I put in the letter, and I asked Brian to put in the transmittal letter on the budget, was to take care of the education piece, take care of the primary care. But Brian, speak a little bit about the value of having a budget that meets the needs on a fiscal responsibility.
Sorry, I think we have a mic out here.
Okay. Okay. Well, yeah.
Yep. So as the governor pointed out, the Fitch Ratings has upgraded the state's bond rating from AA to AA+. They did that in May. That was after an increase from the moving from stable to positive. When they did that, they specifically noted that the ratings were based on the state's cautious and prudent fiscal management and improved long-term liability position, and also incorporate conservative budget management practices institutionalized across administrations, which feature substantial control over spending. This is again getting back to the point that our spending actually matches our revenue growth. And we've had a number of, we've had federal funds in the past. We've used those on largely one-time spending initiatives, so that's not exacerbating the budget deficit. Surpluses we've tried to put into one-time spending, so that is also a way of showing fiscal responsibility. And this matters because when we get our bonds upgraded, that reduces the cost of debt service. That means that there's more money that we can use for vital priorities in the state budget.
Just a little more on the numbers, Brian. It identified $67 million from increased revenue. Just off the top of my head, there was, from the governor's original budget, there was $15 million undervaluing the state police contract, 12 from undercounting students in poverty. Was it 6 or something for the ACI thing that was never going to happen? 10 million from the digital ad tax that was never going to happen, and RIPTA. That gets us to like 50 of that 67. You want to also do the primary care, which is 45. So where is the other money coming from? Or do you want to cut some of the other things, such as the money for nursing homes and money for hospitals?
So as I said, we can address the issues that you mentioned, and by our calculations, we have about $23 million after addressing some of the things that some of the changes in the budget from when we submitted to June, from January to June, as well as things like the digital advertising tax that the General Assembly expressed that they didn't want to do. That left us about $23 million. The primary care rate increase is $8.25 million of general revenue. When you include all funds, then it's actually about $26 million when you add Medicaid. That gives us about $15 million remaining for other priorities, including the federally qualified health centers, nursing homes, but we'd have to make decisions.
And so where is the other revenue coming from? Where is the other 23 coming from?
The $67.3 million is what was available after revenue estimating. It was about $80 million, but then we had already accounted for some of that. So when we're looking at taking that 67 to address the DOC consolidation, the student enrollment changes, the collective bargaining, and a few other items, we estimate that that gives us about $23 million that's available for primary care and other initiatives.
Nancy?
Do you have any second thoughts about your cabinet raises that you insisted upon despite reluctance from the speaker noting the tight fiscal budget?
No, I explained that at the time, but I think that's interesting you bring up that point when we talk about $80,000 here and we're talking about, I don't know, $68 million of additional expenses here. So I'm not sure that they are apples and apples. But.
So the answer is no.
No, I think that we did the right thing in terms of the fact that it fit inside the budget. I didn't have to tax for it. And it made sense in terms of making sure that we're competitive in terms of our staffing. And we've got a good staff. I think Brian represents the quality of the staff that sometimes is under fire.
Governor, if you're having regular meetings with the Speaker and the Senate President, as you said you are, but you didn't find out about some of these changes until they were made public, do you feel like you were blindsided or should have known, or do you think they were not taking these meetings seriously or what you thought they should be?
No, I don't think it's blindsided. I think it's just the way that the system works. I accept those things. And at the same time, like I said, we're talking about policy today, right? We're not talking about individual, relationships. We build relationships so that we can talk about policy in an open, frank way like I'm doing today.
And back to the veto issue, do you not want to veto it because you know it would just be overridden even though they'd have to come back and do it? I mean, do you just not want to have that perception?
Yeah, what I think is that I'm doing my best today to explain that people are being taxed unnecessarily. And I don't believe that there would be a change in terms of the outcome of the budget process if it went back to the General Assembly.
It's something that is in the budget, the truck tolls, right? And that you proposed that hopefully they'd be back on sometime early next year. Do you have any of that $10 million? Are you assured by DOT that they'll be able to be turned back on? Have you figured out working around the cap issue? Where does that stand? And is it realistic to?
We're confident that that's going to happen. And while you're bringing up all these numbers too, I just want to also say that, and Brian, I'd like to have Brian you speak to some of the issues that we put in the budget in terms of our ride cap, in particular the Washington Bridge.
Certainly. So,
I'm sorry,
so on the Washington Bridge, I do want to make clear that when we submitted the governor's budget, we did expect that there would be possibly expect that there could be additional costs to the Washington Bridge. As you know, the bids were not going to be opened until the beginning of June. That is toward the end of the legislative session. So we had reserved about $28 million in the capital budget, RICAP, with the expectation that we may need to tap some of that. Turned out we needed about $22 million. We didn't specifically put it into the Washington Bridge line item in the capital budget because we didn't know exactly what the number would be, but we had reserved $28 million, and turns out we needed a little bit less than that.
Governor.
Bartholomew Town.
Newport Film Outdoors is back starting Thursday, June 26th at the Great Friends Meeting House. This beloved 10-week series opens with the award-winning documentary, The Last Dive. Come with your blanket and lawn chair for free popcorn, live music, a pre-film conversation with the director, and a sunset screening. Head to newportfilm.com for all details. Are you ready to take the next step in your career? At URI Online, they offer business and leadership-focused programs designed to fit your life. Whether your goal is to advance your career in fields like public administration, supply chain management, or training and development, their online programs provide the flexibility you need with a high-quality education you deserve. Learn more from experienced faculty and collaborate with a network of professionals, all from the comfort of your home or wherever life takes you. Visit uri.edu/online to explore programs and start building your future today. URI Online. Learn anywhere with us. Birds are disappearing from our landscape at a rapid pace. Over 1/3 of those breeding on Audubon Society of Rhode Island's wildlife refuges are in decline. Climate change has taken a toll on their migration, nesting, and food sources. While science is highlighting the problem, Audubon is working on real solutions with a plan to rapidly reduce their carbon emissions. The organization will be free of fossil fuels by 2030, with renewable energy powering Audubon's buildings, equipment, and vehicles. To shape our future, all of us must act. Learn more about Repowering Audubon, their avian research, and how you can join their fight for climate resiliency. Visit asri.org/repower.
Anticipating a little bit of the reaction we're going to hear, the legislators are going to say things like primary care. You don't seem to be quarreling with the legislature that they put the extra money in, and they'll say, but you were calling for another study, which leads me to my question. I have seen past governors issue revised budgets after the revenue estimating conference. At the point you knew you had an extra $67 million in general revenue, and you knew that some of your original changes were no longer going to be in the budget, why didn't you just put out a revised budget and tell everybody, not wait until we're all here the day before the budget becomes law without your signature? Why didn't you tell us earlier, this is how you would have handled that extra 67 and the amounts you withdrew from the budget, your budget?
Well, you would need a crystal ball, Kathy, to understand what we were going to get at the same time you got it, right? So, but Brian, again, it's not like we go dark in terms of our communication with both the House Fiscal and the Senate Fiscal offices. Brian can just repeat that, but you might as well do that. But to answer your question, these type of things, and go back to the letter that I transmitted. This was something that I asked Brian to put in the transmittal letter when we put the budget in, that there was additional revenue, and we anticipated there would be additional revenue because we kind of low estimate the November funding, and then we end up with seeing a little bit more, but than we anticipated in November. But in that letter, I made specific asks of Brian and the DOA to put in that it was becoming clearer, even in January, that there may be a need to fund the education differently. And it was becoming a very clear issue that the primary care was something that needed to be addressed. And I put that in there long before the anchor issue arose, right? So we were anticipating that those two things would be covered. So in terms of the question of the General Assembly saying, geez, the primary care is something we need to do, well, we agree with that. And we agreed with that in the letter that I wrote when we transmitted the budget.
Slightly.
Brian, could you just clarify again the process that you're involved in on a regular basis?
Yes.
Can I clarify my question? Because I understood part one of your answer, but I was really asking you, you're telling us here now how you would have handled things, how you would have handled RIPTA. Yes, you agree on certain things that they did. Why did you not put in, as has been done by past governors, a revised budget maybe in April and said, or just held a press conference at that time and said, yay, we've got an extra $67 million. This is how I would spend it.
Yeah, I'll let Brian answer the question about the decision on whether we put, a revised budget in. But I can tell you that we continue to speak with leadership, both in the House and the Senate. On the RIPTA issue, we had very open and frank conversations about the fact that the efficiency analysis was not completed. We provided them with a path, as Brian explained, on how we could do it without raising the 2-cent gas tax. So we were involved in those conversations that you're asking about. We're involved in that process.
Accepting that you were involved in the process, I think some of us are hearing it for the first time. You're reaching out to the public with some of what you're saying right now maybe some of, I don't know about everybody else in the room, I'm hearing some of it for the first time.
Yeah. Well, Brian, maybe you just kind of talk about the way that budgets flow.
So the general process is the governor submits the budget in January, as you know, and we make amendments to the budget as necessary as there are additional dollars available. But generally speaking, there are no major changes to the outlook until the May Revenue Estimating Conference at the beginning of May. At that point, any new revenues, sometimes there are new revenues, sometimes there are less revenues. Those normally do not get adjusted in budget amendments. At that point, it really moves into negotiations and conversations between the Governor's Office and Office of Management and Budget and the General Assembly.
All right, so Kim, Governor, you have said today that your message is clear, that this is a bad budget. But what is your message to the working class families that you say are going to be punished the most, who are looking to you that you have the ability and the power to stop this bad budget from going into effect? What is your message to them?
My message is that it was unnecessary. The General Assembly put in increases on health care costs, on increases on automobile ownership, on home ownership. They should be talking to their General Assembly members. When you get when you have a budget that passes overwhelmingly, as this did, I've taken a path, and I think the questions that Jim asked earlier is appropriate, but I've taken the path that I think is most effective, and we are going to get the message out to the general public. And I happen to believe that each budget impacts the next budget. So we're already starting to work on, and I've said this, we'll manage the budget that we get, just like we managed last year's budget that added about $94 million over and above what we actually presented to the General Assembly. And we had to deal with a structural deficit that was a great deal higher in November when we started doing the work than we should have, in my opinion. So I think the message to the people is they need to talk to their General Assembly members. And I mentioned earlier, they may agree with me, but as governor, I see it as my job to let people know when I believe that we're taxing people and raising fees that we don't have to raise to provide a good, solid budget that can set the table for the progress that we're making. I don't want to. I'd rather be taking this, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, than having it 1 step forward and 2 steps back. And this is 2 steps back, in my opinion. And so, what we're talking about not only is the current budget, but we're talking about the next budget and the following budget on that. So that you have to kind of meld these budgets together. So what I would be saying to the people who are going to pay higher at the gas tank, higher on their registration fees, higher on their parking fees, or higher on their health insurance, or higher on their transactions on the homes that they own, regardless of the value of the home. This is not a home value that is over X amount of dollars. This is a tax of $1,300 to $2,000 additional on every transaction that happens in the state of Rhode Island. So it's anybody in this room that owns a home, they just got taxed $1,300 minimum on an average, on just the average sale price. So what I would be saying to the people is, talk to your General Assembly members. Let them know that we shouldn't be taxing them, creating problems that you don't have to be creating, that makes their ability to pay their bills more difficult. That's what I would be saying.
First, question for both of you, but Brian first, just on budget clarification. On RICAP and the Washington Bridge, and you and Sharon going back and forth now for weeks on this. So you're saying there was $22 million in unallocated RICAP,
yes.
like it wasn't programmed in future fiscal years for anything else that was just sitting out there that could have been?
Correct, yeah. So the way that the capital budget works is it is a 5-year budget. Unlike the operating budget, which really just looks at the current fiscal year and the next fiscal year, a capital budget is done over 5 years. And each project in there is often programmed over multiple years. We assume that there's going to be a certain amount of money coming into RICAP each year. We budget against those expected revenues, and we had kept about $28 million unallocated based on what we expected future revenues to be. And that essentially allowed us the flexibility to move funding over to the Washington Bridge when it became clear that we needed to.
And then the other question I have for you, Brian, is so, and I'm sure it's hard for everyone to follow this many bouncing balls with numbers, but if we had a net $67 million in additional resources, though, you did the math earlier, I think, to a Patrick question about getting down to 23 after the fixes for the education and stuff, could have done the healthcare general revenue piece, still have money. What did they spend a bunch of money on then beyond those things that have been discussed so much?
Certainly. So Wavemaker Fellowships, that was $1.6 million. The governor's budget had proposed, they added $1.6 million. This was a budget decision we made because all higher ed education affordability programs are being evaluated. So we said, let's not keep investing in some of these programs until we understand what the impact is. There was additional funding for municipal aid. They restored the motor vehicle car tax phase-out inflator. We had proposed eliminating that. So that was $4.7 million. They also increased additional aid to to cities and towns through the payment in lieu of taxes program, distressed communities. Now, I think many of you know, I ran the League of Cities and Towns. The governor's a former mayor. These are programs.
The governor's kind of thinking, give money to the mayor.
These are things that we generally would support, but when we went and put these into the budget, we did not include these because we had to make difficult choices. So those are just two examples.
And on the municipal side of the thing, I was a mayor, right, when the state cut 30% of our budget when we only represented 3% of the budget. So I made a conscious effort to make sure that we're not reducing in the same way to municipalities. In fact, we have provided more education aid to the local communities since I've been here than I would venture to say than any governor has in the past. So we are investing.
I'll hand it off to everybody else. I heard you about the calculus on not vetoing, and yet you're being very clear about that you don't think this is a good budget bill. You're going to lead all the newscasts saying me on the cover of the paper. What makes you so sure that if you hadn't vetoed it, they might have dropped something like the health insurance assessment because of the political pressure you're putting on them this morning?
Well, they can do that. They can go revise the budget right now if they choose to do it, Tim. Right, Ted? I mean, I don't. They can call it back, right? It's pretty hot out there today, so I don't think they can do that. But yeah, they have the ability to do that right now. And so if they get enough questions from their constituents, where they get enough pressure and say, you didn't have to raise my gas taxes by 2 cents. The governor's office provided a path to provide the $15 million to RIPTA without doing that. That's the truth. So they can put pressure on the General Assembly to do that as well.
So and that's sort of what I meant by de facto line item, where you put pressure on the General Assembly in a revised budget. So you're saying that members of the public, if they want to see a revised budget, they should now be hounding the General Assembly, their General Assembly members, to get back in session and make revisions?
Not only that, Bill, but there's a budget coming next year. That can get ahead of this stuff just by revising in the next budget.
It's tough without polling, but from the standpoint of public sentiment right now, do you think people see this budget and say, boy, here they are up at the State House again, more taxes, more fees, so on and so forth? And is that your calculus? But then I know we're not New York. There's a lot of differences. But we look at the mayor's race in New York last night, where a candidate that is in favor of a more, let's face it, socialized version of government had overwhelming support. Do you think that a lot of Rhode Islanders right now are moving in a direction where they say, you know what, fees increase, taxes increase, but we need it. People are hurting. People are suffering. They deserve transit. They deserve more opportunities for low income and affordable housing. So their calculus might be, you know what, it's going to cost me 2 cents more at the pump, but we need a better society.
Well, I don't think they realized that they didn't have to get charged 2 cents. That's the issue. And I've answered the question in terms of would we raise fees and taxes when you need it? Yeah, I would. But I also would want to be able to sit here and tell you why. And I'm sitting here telling you that you didn't have to raise the auto cost for owning an automobile in the state. You didn't have to raise the cost for owning a home in the state. You didn't have to raise the cost on health care, in the way that it was done. And by the way, that you're not even going to see that charge on your health insurance bill. It's just going to get melded in. You won't even see it. And it sets a dangerous precedent, in my opinion, Or maybe it's $6 next year, $8 next year, right? So I think that I think the general public, just like we just said here, you've had very little time to digest this budget, and there has not been a whole lot of public discussion on it. I think that after today, I think there will be, and I think that we'll get direction as we go into the next budget cycle, whether in fact we address any of these issues in the next budget cycle. But a lot has to do with, as we said over and over again, the uncertainty and the I don't even know how to describe what's happening in Washington, but it could fall on us pretty quickly.
Governor, towards the beginning of your comments, you mentioned state rankings, and I was wondering, what is the importance of those? Because I don't see those as being scientific or really just clickbait online. So what do you see the importance of those as being?
Well, I think that the way that people perceive the state inside the state and outside the state is really important to our economy. Yes, I think that some of the rankings, you certainly, we read about the ones that aren't so good. I see them all. But I think it's really important that they set an agenda for our office to do better in infrastructure. And so when I call in and I have our staff call in to the people who are doing the rankings, or I bring in the engineers out of URI that talk about what is being presented, that gets factored into what those rankings look like, we get better at it, right? So having a goal to do better on education, having a goal that I've set to be the very best in the country by 2030 on our reading and math scores has brought us to really a phenomenal program with Learn 365 with 22 learning centers opening up around the state of Rhode Island. With out-of-school strategies, a math matters program, an attendance matters program, with people from Japan are calling us about how are we accelerating attendance in our schools. To answer your question, that all falls into how people feel about the state of Rhode Island. And it has an impact in terms of the overall economy, clearly. But we're also showing some valid points that are not clickbait. Your bonding rating, to get a bond upgrade, that's real. Yeah. That's real. Yeah, that's not unreal. And I think that we're, I don't like to predict things too much, but I think we're gonna get another one, because I feel as though that's an important area to solidify the finances in the state, so that if we need to do things to help people, as Bill's saying, that we have that ability to do it.
Just a question, who did engineers at URI contact about an infrastructure rating?
There is a small group of people that supply, and it took me almost a year and a half to find out who they were. So, but I found out, and we've met with them, and we continue to meet with them, and they operate on no budget, and we can't give them a budget because it's like you're tampering with rankings or whatever it is. So, but yes, there's a small group that actually supplies to the National Highway Department on our infrastructure all the information, and I find out that actually we're still 2 years behind on our information. But that's getting into the weeds, but I'm happy to follow up on that, because I think it's an important issue in terms of how we're actually ranked and how we're responding with information that actually gives us that, the fair ranking right now.
Guys, we're at an hour. I knew there were a couple of hands. I think, Nancy, I'm going to take your question. David, we're going to take yours. Do you have one, Steph? Is that what you're saying?
Other topic.
Okay, we're going to do other topics when this is over. All right. And then we're done. So you two, and then we're wrapping. Thank you all for your time.
Just to be crystal clear, you said you had very frank and open conversations with legislative leaders about RIPTA. They did not mention to you a 2-cent increase in the gas tax at all. You had no idea about that until House Fiscal came out with their revised budget.
That's correct.
And then in terms of the comparisons to Massachusetts and Connecticut both have car taxes. Do you think that's a fair comparison? And speaking about past budgets, do you regret phasing out Rhode Island's car tax as quickly as we did?
No, I think that's, again, we're trying to lower costs for families who live in the state of Rhode Island, and we have done that with the car tax, and we also did that with the business with the tangible tax. We're doing very constructive things to lower costs for people who live in the state of Rhode Island, and the point of this session is that we just laid on additional expenses to the families and the working families in the state of Rhode Island, and in my opinion, we didn't have to lay on them.
Governor, I want to ask about perceptions, because perceptions matter, especially when you're running for re-election. You're against the 2-cent gas tax increase, but you won't say where you stand on the Taylor Swift tax, because that's a hypothetical or whatever. You might need it in the future. You're against the budget, but you're going to allow it to become law. How do you answer critics who say this is sending a little bit of a mixed message, that it might be a bit wishy-washy here?
I think, first of all, we don't have a line item veto. So you have to mention that, right? If you're going to talk about what authority a governor has, I'm using the authority that a governor has today.
But how do you make the case that you're fighting for working Rhode Islanders if you fold?
We're not folding. I don't know when the last time a budget wasn't signed in the state of Rhode Island, but I'm not showing up to sign a budget because I want the people to know everything that we've talked about today. And then we've gone around in circles a little bit about when we tax and when we don't tax. I don't, we need revenue to support a state budget. I'm not saying that I'm against raising taxes when we need it. What I'm telling you today is we didn't need to raise taxes again on cars, on health insurance, or on real estate.
What day does it go into effect, or what moment your signature?
Friday.
Friday?
That's what I'm told, Friday.
Thank you, everybody. I know some of you had questions outside of budget and everything. Gaggle for a minute.
Thanks for your time.
Hey, thanks for stopping by Bartholomew Town. For more content, follow me on Instagram @BillBartholomew.